Okay, so today we have Ruben Gaona and Ben Juarez joining us on the MKE Tech Podcast. How are you doing, Ruben?
I'm blessed. Thank you for asking, Nadiyah. Thank you for having me here.
Of course, there's a lot to dive into. I always like to start with a kind of a corny question. Okay, I'm catching you off guard. You ready?
I was born ready, so
You're
let's go.
born ready. Okay. All right. So there's different types of AI out there, right? If you were an AI, what would be your specialty?
Ooh, good one. I think translation. I think that's one of the things, especially like speaking with individuals that are bilingual or talk other languages. I think we could do a lot better job in not only translating like those languages we know, but dialogues from other countries and indigenous people.
Sure.
So I think that would be my specialty. Kind of like find a way can we incorporate that into like and validate those languages that I think often we get forgotten about.
Awesome. I love that. That's really cool. And I think that'd be awesome for people who kind of want to learn about their ancestors and
hmm
the languages that they used to speak. And I don't know, I think it could be good to sort of make or bridge that gap.
Most definitely. And I don't know who I was having a conversation with last week, and that thing came up. I believe like she was struggling and like how to do something, and I was like, well, can you do it in your language? And she's like, well, I don't know how to do it in my language. And I was like, wow, like, you know what? We never sat here and actually thought and gave it a deep thought about why has no one created this at all, like incorporated this kind of things. And I was like, wow, kind of, I think that's my entrepreneurial mindset going in. Like,
Yeah. Yesterday we had the EIT Summit, the Equity in Tech Summit, and one of the things that kept resurfacing is how, AI and just like, programming languages in general is based off of the English language for the most part, and how there needs to be, more developers in the space, data science space, to make sure that other languages are being accounted for, not just the languages, but also the context, the cultural context as well. So I just think it's really, really interesting. But I'd love for you to share a bit more about yourself, your journey, and more about My Way Out, because now there's The Way Out and My Way Out.
yes, My Way Out is a nonprofit organization where we're empowering and enriching the lives of justice involved individuals and their families. So we work with justice involved individuals or anyone who's been involved with the system and provide them resources to reintegrate back into society. It's named My Way Out particular because I took it like a different approach of typically what already has been out there. Instead of telling an individual like what you need to do, I kind of like to hear from them. Like, what is your way out? You tell me what we can do and what we need to provide, what resources, whether it be housing, resume writing, interviewing skills, clothing, transportation help, however that their way out looks like that they struggled before, and try to actually make an impact on reducing recidivism by assisting them and not being able to go back into incarceration. So it's been an amazing year, honestly.
Yeah, I've been able to witness some of the cool stuff that y'all been doing. You've gotten some great awards. I've seen y'all on stage. I've seen you guys doing a lot of cool things, and it just speaks to your growth, but more importantly, the impact that you're making in community. It's really exciting to see the growth of My Way Out.
Thank you. But I do gotta say, I'll shameless plug, thank you, MKE Tech Hub, because they constantly, I think, since last year when we started in 2022, you've been there with us alongside when we came to you and we're like, okay, one of the biggest things we're seeing people struggle, because I know when I came out of incarceration, it took me 4 hours to fill my first online application. And I was like, how can we start helping those that have been gone for a long time? And you being part of that amazing journey, introducing that basic introduction to technology for just evolved individuals, showing them how to navigate a computer, how to turn on a computer. Yeah. I think this last class, if you remember, and pardon me if I get emotional, but we had like a 65-year-old man. Yeah. And when he applied, he said, the first day, he said, I'm too stupid to learn any of this. Oh. And then by graduation, he was already going to YouTube, downloading music, and he's like, "Man, Ruben." I caught him in the hallway when he had gone to the bathroom. He was coming back, and he's like, "Ruben, I downloaded some music from YouTube, and I'm gonna learn how to play it now, man."
Yeah, that was a big part of our curriculum,
Mhm.
YouTube. And so the reason why is because it's one thing to like teach a specific skill in that 4 week period, but it's a whole other thing to kind of give them a tool where they can continue to learn, and that's what YouTube is.
Yeah, I definitely, I mean, I've learned so much from it. You introduced to me ChatGPT. Am I right? And to me, it was like, okay, how do I leverage this to help my justice evolved individuals, especially people like me who like struggle in English? I'm an ESL kid, so I've always struggled with English. And I was like, how do I show people how to use this when it comes to like writing a resume? Am I right? Like, especially when we have to explain a professional summary.
Absolutely.
A lot of us don't know how to write it like intelligent enough or educationally enough to a professional summary in 3 to 4 sentences.
It's definitely a collective effort needed to start to bring more awareness and education. I know that Latinos in Tech is doing an incredible job of educating communities around AI. Ben, share a little bit about what y'all are doing in the space.
We're helping primarily Spanish-speaking business owners to learn how to use AI in order to create designs, create content. What Ruben was saying in terms of like summarizing and putting in Spanish what they want to say in English, and then have that translated into a professional, kind of sound or tone. So it's been really cool to see like a lot of people take advantage of our trainings.
Interesting. Does ChatGPT allow you to translate?
Yeah.
So you can actually type something in English and then ask it to translate it to Spanish?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Something new. I
Yep.
know it. Like I said last week, when that question came around, I went back to the house and I wrote a poem in Spanish until, it really wasn't a poem. I just typed some words and said, write a poem in Spanish. And he wrote it in Spanish. So I was like, oh, it writes Spanish.
Yeah.
But I did not know that it translated.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can have it translate into even a particular type of Spanish. I usually say like, can you, because I don't want it in Spanish, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Castellano or whatever.
What's Spanish?
Castellano.
Castellano.
Yeah. That's the actual like name of the language. It's
Okay.
not Spanish.
Yeah.
We just call it Spanish because,
We call it Spanish.
Yeah.
Okay.
but we don't speak that Spanish.
No.
We speak, well, in my case, Salvadoran Spanish, in your case, Mexican Spanish, Chilango Spanish.
Yeah. Wow.
So you can ask it to do its best to translate, into a more like dialect that you is more regional to you, I guess, or more local to you.
That's really interesting. So we've had a lot of great conversations and events during Wisconsin Tech Month. We are currently in week 2, which we're calling Women in Tech Week. I think my days are at this point blending all together. So it was either early this week or last week. We had the Celebrating Diversity in STEM event hosted by UWM and led by a woman named Anique. It was an incredible event. We got to the Q&A section, and I believe it was the executive director of 889. He raised his hand and asked, how can the intersection of history and STEM be used or leveraged to drive more representation in the field? And it kind of left people a little like pondering, like, what do you mean? But then he went on to say, like, well, you take a look at our ancestors, like clearly they were like, mathematicians, right? In terms of all of the different things that they built. And how can we leverage that to inspire today's generation to show like, hey, we got to stop this narrative of like, there's not enough of us in STEM, and like shift it to, we've always been here. We've always inspired, STEM, and we have to, get back to that space. And that's when somebody brought up Latinos in Tech and the work that you all are doing. And so I'd love for you to share more about what's coming up in week 3, Somos Tech Week.
Week 3 is Somos Tech Week. So we, for Somos Tech Summit, we actually talk about all of that, right? We say, we talk about how we're first gen, in terms of like going into college. But as Nadiyah was saying, like we've always been there. Like our ancestors are master mathematicians, astronomers, engineers, like people that were doing advanced technological work, so much so that when the Spaniards saw this technology, they thought it was devil stuff.
Mhm.
And so they were afraid of it, and they burned so many books that kind of had this knowledge, and we lost
A lot.
several hundreds of years of advanced knowledge. And if they would have worked together, we would have seen the human race like advance faster. Instead, you had to wait another 300 to 400 years for what they were already doing. And this is like only like recently, by the way, that we've been discovering this. Like anthropologists and archaeologists have been discovering all this. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So that's how we've been inspiring the new generation of engineers, of Latino engineers,
Yeah. And so I do think that one thing that I shared at this event is that innately humans learn through storytelling. And so I think it's important for us to ask ourselves, well, what story are we constantly telling or pushing to our youth or just to our communities in general? What stories are we believing? And then it goes back to what I'm always saying, whose imagination are we living in? Right? Because a lot of how we navigate society right now is not necessarily based off of what we've dreamt of for ourselves, but what somebody else has dreamt up for us. And so then that, to circle it back to tech and AI, this is why making sure that we are more represented, not just as consumers and users, but as developers is really, really important, because AI is going to be, and it currently is, threaded throughout just about everything that we touch and that we interact with daily, right? But if we're not behind that code, then whose imagination, whose plan are we living in, right? And so I think that that's just really important. And to bring it back to the work that you and I do together with Milky Way Tech Hub and My Way Out partnership, you're right. A lot of times individuals do come in and they tell themselves the story, well, I'm too dumb, or this is too difficult. And right away, when I start off, and I'm sure you can, be a witness to this, I let them know, like, technology is advancing so quickly. I have to educate myself daily. Like I'm constantly updating myself. So like because tech is advancing so rapidly, put us all on the same playing field to an extent, right? And understand that we're all trying to like grasp this together. This is a learning journey, and I'm not going to know every single thing that ChatGPT can do. But I'm going to teach you what I do know, and we're going to learn together. And there are some aha moments for you and I when we're teaching. Like, oh, I didn't know it could do that. That's cool, right?
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
I think I echo heavily on what you, Ben, and you say that there is power in our story. I think one of the things that I have managed to be so vocal about my journey in reentry has been for the mere fact that I've taken a decision on myself to share that story, to no longer allow the stigma that society has placed on us in so many years of, especially as minorities, right? You got to be quiet. And shut up and just keep going.
Yes.
And no, I could speak up. I do have a voice.
Yes, you do.
Know, and I think the more we echo that, and the same thing with like right now with the AI and everything, I think people are afraid of what they don't know.
Yep.
But why not get to learn it then and leverage that, instead of continue being afraid? I think for years we've been afraid. And at the end of the day, the studies and the numbers show otherwise. People were afraid of justice involved individuals, of hiring them. Studies show they're one of the best employees there are out there.
Because they got something to prove.
Yes. And it's like, okay, we, like you say, we believe what we've been told, but why not find out for ourselves? And those who are doing this playing field, especially tech, who are sitting, writing those codes, share your stories. Let your voice, because your voice is our voice.
Yeah, exactly that. So one of the reasons why I'm, so excited about what's happening with Wisconsin Tech Month is that it is being led by a Black women-led tech, a Latino-led organization. And this is a huge narrative shift compared to what leadership looked like even a couple of years ago. And I have seen people a little bit apprehensive, at least, to the shift in leadership. And I was just talking to Ben about this and a couple other folks earlier this week about how like some folks are just like, well, why should Tech Month be, or why should the initiative be an entire month, or, questioning the size of it, and all sorts of ways in which we're going about planning and executing. And I think it goes back to that question that I asked earlier, whose imagination are we living in?
Mhm.
Because there are a lot of folks who I have conversations, and it's very much about, let's figure out how we make it smaller, or shrink the work that we're doing. And the narrative that I would like to push is that Black and brown folks, one, can lead really big initiatives, are leading really big initiatives, and are doing it really well.
Yeah.
And I think that is the story that we are writing together, and a legacy really that I'm very proud of. And the hope is that others can see us and want to follow in a similar direction, right? We can begin to sort of shift this narrative that Milwaukee's the worst place to live and raise your children and whatnot, and to maybe it's the best place for Black folks and Latino folks to come and to thrive in the field of technology. So the imagination of some folks might have us sort of shrink ourselves, right, to fit whatever character that they might have set in their heads. But I think part of driving more representation in STEM, whether it be in the AI space or whatever it might be, requires us to rethink whose imagination we've been living in and shift the stories.
Most definitely.
All right. Thanks again, Ruben, for joining us. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you both.